We'll start recording now. Again, thank you guys so much for joining us. This is a really fun opportunity. We started doing our young athlete family info hours last month. So this is our second info hour. We have a lot of great topics we're working to schedule throughout the year. So definitely keep an eye out for those emails. We'll do a reminder at the end of this session on what the topic will be for the next one. But for this evening, we are going to talk about picky eaters and how to make eating more fun. I know that's a hot topic for a lot of our young athlete families. So hopefully you guys will get some really valuable information tonight. So again, if you guys can make sure that you are muted until after the presentation, we'll do a quick question and answer time after Sarah's presentation. She has graciously joined us this evening to give us her expertise. She is a speech and language pathologist and feeding specialist at Children's Hospital, Colorado. The breadth of her feeding experience spans across the lifespan, but is currently focused with infants and toddlers and with children that have complex medical needs and who need supplemental nutrition, specifically regarding feeding tubes. She has presented in the area of feeding and swallowing in the last year for Maryland Speech and Hearing Association and as a guest lecturer for Townsend University in this area. And she has worked all over the country in areas of feeding and swallowing for the last 13 years. She enjoys educating parents and other family members on how to make feeding time less challenging and more pleasurable for everyone involved. So thank you so much for joining us, Sarah. I'm going to turn it over to you. And again, thanks for joining us. We're excited to have you.
Thank you so much, Mandy, for the introduction. Yeah, I'm happy to be here. I work at Children's Colorado, and I work almost primarily in the area of feeding. And like she said, in a lot with infants, but also across the lifespan. And I worked with everybody of every age throughout the years. So I hope today that I can give you guys some information that might be helpful if you're struggling with some feeding challenges at home. And I definitely want to make this worth your while. So I'm going to go through the slides, and then afterwards, I would love to make it more of a group discussion. Happy to answer any questions that you might have or any comments as well. So, all right, let's see. So let's talk about some reasons why kids are picky eaters. So sometimes we look into sensory problems as being why. So they don't like the way things feel. They don't like tags on their clothes or sand under their feet. And they have a hard time with the sensation of food in their mouth. So one thing that we try to do is when we start feeding babies, little babies, purees, we work on letting them get really messy and letting them get their hands dirty and feeding themselves from the beginning, because we found that kids are more likely to tolerate things in their mouth if they can tolerate them on their hands. And so that's one reason. Mistrust is also a reason. Sometimes kids, they just don't trust their food, right? So if it looks different, it feels different, it smells different, I just don't feel safe around that food. And I can't explain why. I'm just not going to eat it today. Some kids have had history of bad experiences or pain. So these are the types of kids that I see a lot. So kids that vomit a lot, kids that have really bad reflux as babies, or have had experiences in the hospital where everything that was coming to their face was really a negative experience. So they've had feeding tubes or oxygen tubes or tubes down their throat for multiple reasons that we had to do to keep them healthy. But it can lead to a mistrust of what's coming into their body. Mismatch of texture to their skills. So maybe they don't have the skill set to chew a piece of steak. Maybe their muscles in their face are weaker and they're not able to manipulate that texture, or their tongue does not move as readily as it maybe should. And so they avoid certain things because it's hard for them to chew them up. Sameness is comforting. So if you buy a basket of blueberries and then you buy a bag of goldfish crackers, you know, those goldfish crackers are always going to taste exactly the same. You know what to expect. But those blueberries, you might get a sour one in there. You might get a moldy one by accident. So they can surprise you. So it can be harder to kind of sell some of those fresh foods that change in texture and in taste based on where they are in their freshness scale. And then is it biological? So is there something about, you know, your parent was a picky eater, their parent was a picky eater, or they had specific things that were difficult for them? Is there something across, and I don't know, this is why there's a question here. I have no idea. I don't know about the research on this, but just a thought. And is there something like in our history where when kids could start to walk and they were hunter-gatherers, that they had to be more skeptical of what they ate because the poisonous bush, you know, could hurt them? So that's just a thought. So the first thing that we talk about with food is, you know, when we were, at least when I was a kid and when my parents were kids, you know, stop playing with your food. Stop that. Like, you're going to sit at the table and you're going to have, you know, your elbows off the table and you're going to be, you know, you're just going to eat what's in front of you. And I think that there is a place for that. But I also think that kids really respond to having, a lot of sensory experiences with their food, in terms of making it seem more fun. So if you have a child, for example, like we've got a picture here of carrots and maybe that's cucumbers or zucchini as checker pieces, maybe they don't want to eat carrots or zucchini, and you're working on those foods and you're working on exposing them to those foods. Maybe you play a game of checkers with carrots and zucchini and they don't actually eat the carrots and zucchini today, but maybe after their third or fourth game of checkers, they've become really good at touching it and feeling it on their hands because they moved it around the board. And so they're more likely, like I said, to get it in their mouth if they can tolerate it on their hands. And so the whole thing is just about exposure to the food. So even if they don't eat it, what can we do to expose them? Check out my new glasses. I wonder if it will wiggle if I shake it. Let's have a squishing contest, maybe with like the peas and you're squishing. So a kid with sensory issues, you know, that's a really great task for them, because it really that's going to mimic what it's going to do in their mouth when their teeth squish it. So if they, again, tolerate it on their hands. I'm going to make designs with my teeth. So I love doing this one, especially with things like cucumber or zucchini. You can make a bite mark on the food and just kind of like show them, oh, look, my teeth made that design. I wonder what your teeth would make. And then pretty soon they've got it in their mouth. Or let's build a tower with it. So those are just some really, just some ideas about how to be playful. And then we like to think about what can we change? So is the food that we're presenting that's difficult for the child, is it difficult because of why? Why is it difficult? So we think about that. So is it that it's just, it's presented in the same way every time? You know, I think there's a lot of us out there that as children hated Brussels sprouts because they were boiled and they had no flavor. And if your parents ever made Brussels sprouts, I don't know if yours did, but you know, people didn't eat them and they were really on the bad list, right? Brussels sprouts were like, oh, gross. Everybody hates Brussels sprouts, kind of on the list with lima beans. But in the last few years, Brussels sprouts have had a resurgence, right? So they've really come back around, and they used to be in the doghouse, and now everybody wants Brussels sprouts. And that's because we changed them. We mixed them with bacon. We started to fry them and we started to roast them and we started to add different things to them to make them taste better. And so you can do that with any food, really. You can change the shape. So you can do zucchini slices, you could do noodles, you could shave them, you could take cookie cutters, and I do this with my daughter with cucumbers. So I have a star cookie cutter, and I take the cucumber, and it's just the same size, and it peels the cucumber because it takes the peel out, but it makes a star. She's almost 2 and she loves it. So she loves to eat the star cucumber. And it's just because it's a novelty that it's a star that she likes it. You can vary texture. So for example, if you want your kid to eat apples, but let's say that texture is really hard for them to chew because they just don't have the skill to chew it, or they chew it up and they spit it out because they can't swallow it. Applesauce is just as good. It's nutritionally, it's really not that different. And dietitians will tell us that. So, think of it as a win, and all those applesauce pouches we're winning with those. Thank God for those. And then you can change flavor by adding a dip. So even, to me, I like to think about, like, if you have a kid who won't eat carrots, but they'll eat carrots and ranch, you're still getting the carrot in there. And maybe they lick a bunch of the ranch off, but they're still getting that carrot in their mouth, which might have been further in their mouth than they had it before. So you can put chocolate sauce on banana, garlic salt. So don't be afraid of salt or of like other spices. Some kids really love Mrs. Dash would be a salt-free if you have a restriction on salt, but just some kids really want more flavor in their food, and kids' food can be really bland. And you'd be surprised at how young kids really enjoy different flavors like garlic and onion and herbs. You can put cheese on your broccoli. Again, the bacon with the Brussels sprouts is my favorite example because I love it. You can change portion size. I think this is really important too. I see a lot of our families where the parents really are expecting their child to eat as much as they do, and that's not always the case. We don't eat the same amount every day, and neither do kids. So some days they have days where they're going to eat a little bit more, and they're going to eat a little bit less. Doing meals family style, where the bowl of food is on the table, and you give them, let's say, 3 of these, chicken nuggets, and this chicken nuggets stay on their plate. That if it's a smaller portion, it can be a lot less intimidating, even if it's just one new thing that you put on the plate. Some kids are very sensitive to temperature. So just kind of figuring out if your kid is like that, where it's like, I really don't like anything very cold, or I don't like anything very hot. That's an easy thing to change. You can vary temperature with, heating things up or cooling them down. And varying smell is maybe the hardest because it's really hard to hide things that are really stinky, right? So like really stinky cheeses or really stinky fish. But you can vary smell by the location. So if you're working on something that your child is having a hard time smelling, you can see if we can even be in the same room with this food today. Sometimes I have a very hard time being in the same room with fresh fish. I don't like the way it smells. And so, we all have those foods that are hard for us to smell. You can also mask smell. So like in the banana example, if you have a kid who does not like the way bananas smell, you could mask that smell with maybe some chocolate or some other type of dip, like a caramel dip or something like that. Changing the color of the food, you can add food coloring. I don't know if any of you guys remember when ketchup tried to go green and nobody bought it. It was just like, it was super weird. And we were all like, no, ketchup does not need to be green. It's the same thing, right? But it's green. But nobody bought it and they just gave up on that. They thought, oh, that was fun. But then they gave up because it was like, whoa, that's not right. But you can do that in the other direction, right? So you could make mayonnaise a different color, or you can make anything a different color. And then I talked about fresh foods being inconsistent. So what you can do is try fried fruit, frozen fruit, or dried fruit in its place. And then also these pictures are demonstrating a way you can change the plate to make it more fun. And there are lots of different types of plates out there in the world that make feeding more fun for kids. So having them, and some, you can see also these plates are separated. And I think for a lot of kids, that's really helpful if their food doesn't touch and mix in the flavor. So if they're already having a hard time with flavors to begin with, it can be tough. I also want to note that in the top picture, this plate has a chocolate covered strawberry on the plate with the other food. And I think another thing that we learned from our parents was that we that we get dessert after we eat dinner. And another thing that we do in feeding therapy is really to just kind of level food out, right? So not making one food more important than another food, or like the treat at the end, because we have research to show that that has contributed to our culture of obesity, because it feels like forbidden, or like you shouldn't be having it, or you can only have it when you feel you deserve to have it, or like you've done something else to have it. And so just taking kind of that, breaking down that barrier to that and adding it to the plate. So again, at the end of the day, a chocolate covered strawberry is still a strawberry. So it is still a fresh fruit that you're getting in, and that we're not giving them the entire box of chocolate covered strawberries. You know, we're still portioning it out and saying, okay, maybe they eat that first, and that's okay, but that's not enough for them to get full on. And if they want to eat that first, then they eat that first. And that's sort of where we stand on it. And maybe that's very different in your house. And I'd be interested to hear what you guys do about dessert in your house. So this is huge. So changing your language is a huge thing that you can do very, very quickly that will make a big difference. So a lot of times I hear parents say, do you want to try X? The answer is no. It's going to be no. They're going to say no. If they're in feeding therapy, they're going to say no, because they definitely didn't get to feeding therapy because they said yes. But changing our expectation of what our language sounds like. So things like, "Ooh, I wonder what it smells like," can really just even get kids interested in bringing it up to their face. And changing expectations. You don't have to eat it. So it always surprises everybody when they come into feeding therapy that they're very nervous, and these kids come in and they are just worried that I'm going to like strap them to a chair and shove food in their face. And feeding can be very anxiety producing for some kids. So I always say, you don't have to eat it. You don't have to eat anything here. And I stand by my word on that. They don't. And so if you have a food that your child feels uncomfortable about or stressed about, I feel like it's always important to say, oh, you don't have to eat it, but you can keep it on your plate. You can. And so using statements like that, like you can do that, I think is also really helpful. Or, if they cannot keep it on their plate, and that is the end of it. You can say, oh, but you can keep it right here, right next to your plate, or you can keep it on this plate that's next to your plate. So Ellen Satter is a feeding therapist in Australia, who has a really great handout, which I believe I give you the resource for her website actually at the end of the talk. And she has food rules that I think are really important. So there's things that, as parents, we tend to take ownership of our children's eating and blame it on ourselves sometimes. And, her food rules say, our job as parents is to provide the food and to tell the child when it is time to eat. But the child has to decide if they eat and how much they eat. And it is not up to us to tell our children how much to eat or that they have to eat. But also in her rules, it says the child will eat. So the child, if you have a child who's old enough to understand these rules, you can go through them and say, like, my part is to provide you with food. Your part is to eat. We can negotiate from there. So other things, we stay at the table, even if you're done with your meal, you know, and that might be different in every household. Tend to have kids that don't sit at the table for more than a few minutes. And we don't talk badly about food. So don't yuck my yum, right? So just because you don't like that food doesn't mean I don't like it. So we don't want to talk bad about food, because we talk to the kids about like hurting the food's feelings or hurting somebody else's feelings because we talk badly about their food. And again, we don't have to eat it. So yeah, talking about no food being superior to another, just like the strawberry example. Oh, and then pressure is a huge thing. So really listening to how you talk about food around your kids, and in thinking about what pressure could sound like. So pressure could sound like, but your brother likes it. Or, you know, but it's so good for you. Like, you should eat it. It's so good for you. Or you liked it yesterday. Why don't you like it today? And kids do that to us, right? Like they love, my daughter ate like a pound of green beans a few days ago. And I was like, oh, you love green beans. This is amazing. And then I made green beans and she didn't touch them the next time, you know? And so it's frustrating, because I feel like, you know, we throw food away constantly. And then saying things like, I made it just for you, or, but you used to eat it. So, that's another thing that we work on in feeding therapy too, are foods that kids, maybe dropped out. So that they had these foods in their diet, and then they either ate them so much that they got sick of them, and then they dropped off and they never came back. Or they just stopped wanting to eat that food for whatever reason.
Can I ask you a quick question?
Yeah.
And then I'm so sorry, I have to jump off to a meeting. This is such helpful information. How do you balance the pressure, like taking the pressure off, saying no need to eat that or eat what you want, if every night they only eat fruit? Mm-hmm. Like, how do you balance making sure that they're getting the nutrition they need while keeping the pressure off?
Yeah. And so if you have a kid that legitimately only eats, like, let's say 5 things, and this is, you know, a kid that we would need in to see in therapy. If you have a kid that's that particular, then you need support, right? So you're going to need somebody to follow and help you guide that. But B, we're going to need to find some other main source of nutrition. So maybe that is going to be through a tube, or maybe that is going to be through a nutritional drink. So maybe they need so many Pediasures a day to make sure that they're getting nutrition in other ways. If it's not quite that strict, you know, if it's not quite that extreme, it's just a preference, then what we do is we recommend that you have the happy foods on the plate, but then you also have a new food to learn about. So every day, maybe you have some new food that you learn about. Maybe you pick 5 foods that you want your child to eat, and then they pick 5 foods that maybe they are interested in learning more about. And you talk about that, and then you present them with those foods over and over again in a repeated exposure type of way.
Gotcha. Would you ever, so it's like they'll eat, if the only thing I put on the plate maybe was chicken, they might eat the chicken. Okay. But if I put a little chicken, a little fruit, and a little vegetables, they'll only eat the fruit all the time, no matter what the fruit is.
Yeah.
You suggest like limiting the amount of fruit you put on the plate and bulking up the other stuff?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's worth it to say, like, or I mean, I don't know how old we're talking about, but if you've got a 2-year-old, oh yeah, they live on fruit. Yeah. So the other thing I think that's important for us to remember too is that different ages, different things are important to their body. So little children, especially toddlers, they need more carbohydrates than we need as adults. So they crave carbs. All they want are carbs. That's what they do. And that's how they source their energy. So if their carbohydrate source is fruit, but they'll still eat a small amount of chicken and other things, then I just wouldn't worry that much about that. Okay. I would just keep presenting those foods to them. And yeah, if you want to just put like 4 blueberries on the plate, and then if they want more fruit, they, you know, for sure give them more. But maybe at the presentation at first, don't put as much fruit on there so that they can have more options to eat other things. But yes, but we as adults, we also have this obsession with diet culture, and we are inherently believing that like carbs are bad, carbs are making us fat, and sugar and these things are bad for us. But for kids, you know, a lot of times if they don't have a true feeding disorder, we have to trust that they kind of know what their body needs sometimes.
Super helpful. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for asking a question. So another really great thing to do is get them involved. So depending on how old your kids are, they can do lots of different things. In our house, we have all of the kid plates and bowls and spoons and cups in a drawer that my daughter can get into. And so she can set her own place and she can climb up to the counter and she can set her own place and get all of her own stuff. If you have older kids, they can help with prep, they can help with cutting, they can help with, like, this boy is pulling lettuce off of a bigger piece. And just, again, the point of that is just repeated exposure. Another really good one is to help them clean off the table at the end of the meal. So everybody's plate that they didn't finish, scraping the food into the trash, putting the dishes in the dishwasher, or even if it's hard for your kid to be touching the food or close to the food that they can't eat, then having them set the table is a really great one too. And then that family style meal is also really helpful. So can you pass me the peas? Oh, can you give me some? Oh, wait, before you go, could you just put a little bit on my plate before that goes by? And again, the more willingness they are, and the more exposure they get, the more willingness they will be to put it in their mouth. Okay, so this is a concept called food chaining. So this means that we start with two sometimes radically different foods. And let's say we take a food that they really like. So they like chocolate and we want to get them to cherries. And so maybe this would be how we get them from chocolate to cherries. And so you would maybe start with chocolate and then cherries dipped in chocolate. And then maybe you would go to side by side dried cherries and chocolate chips mixed up. And then maybe we would go to the maraschino cherry because they're more sweet and sugary. And then we would then finally get to the cherry. And by the time we get to the cherry, they've had experience eating cherries in various forms, and they've had good experience, assuming, with those. And so it's not quite as scary by the time you get there. And it is quite amazing how you can chain from one food to another. Most commonly, I would say what we do is we chain from fried foods to fried meats to grilled meats. So like they only eat chicken nuggets. They only eat fish if it's fried, or they only eat, cheese if it's in a mozzarella stick. And so we would chain from that fried food to maybe like a fried chicken nugget to a fried chicken tender, to a fried chicken tender cut up, to a fried chicken tender cut up with grilled, like rotisserie chicken mixed in, and then rotisserie chicken, and then grilled chicken. So that can just help you kind of bridge to new food. Okay, so here's some options if they love this food, and some options to do about it. So if they love goldfish crackers, maybe what they love is they like crunchy and salty. So try baked Parmesan cheese, like Parm crisps. And you can even make these together and have them get involved in making them. If they love potato chips, try veggie chips, which is a flavor change, but not a texture change. So you can change one thing at a time, which is usually a lot more successful than changing lots of things at a time. And then you can try kale chips to dried veggies like broccoli or cauliflower bites. And then you can maybe you can even get to regular veggies. Pizza, try dessert pizza with berries and chocolate sauce, or Nutella and apples. And then you're getting to more fruits. And then we talked about the chicken nuggets, or you can also make chicken tenders at home together. That's another way to get them involved. If they only eat from pouches, try to make your own purees together and put them in reusable pouches so that you can give them more things, more diversity in the pouch. If they only eat Kraft macaroni and cheese, which Kraft macaroni and cheese is a huge hit with most kids, you can try the Kraft powdered cheese mix on a different type of macaroni or a different type of pasta, sorry. Then you can try bow tie spirals, elbows, and then you could try adding in hamburger meat. And when we do that, I don't recommend that you just add in the hamburger meat and ruin the pasta. You can have the pasta the way that they like it, and then on the side, or maybe like in the corner of their plate, they have a little bit of that same pasta with the new thing, with the hamburger meat. And then you can try chili and go to tacos or casseroles, sloppy joes. So once you get ground meat, the possibilities are endless. If they don't love water, right? Like try to get our kids to drink more water. If they don't love water, try adding bubbles such as a soda stream or with sparkling water in a variety of flavors. You could also just add fruit to water, including lemon or lime. Some kids really like stuff like that has really potent flavors. So some kids really love lemons and love, you could even chain from lemonade to water by starting with lemonade and reducing the sugar and reducing the amount of lemon. If they don't love vegetables, try pureeing them and adding them to spaghetti or marinara sauce, but don't hide it. So I want you to tell them that you're doing that. Oh my gosh, can you believe it? We ate spaghetti sauce with carrots in it today. Did you taste carrots in your spaghetti? I didn't know you could eat carrots in spaghetti. Not trying to hide it ever, because you wouldn't want to bite into something thinking it's something else, and then you get a flavor of something different. And that's going to make them mistrust in the future. So you can puree vegetables into soups and into muffins. Zucchini bread is a really great one. And banana bread, things like that. No hiding. Yeah. Let them see that they can eat vegetables in a different way and let them feel like they can be successful. Try dry vegetables if they crave crunch. And also try fruit instead. So nutritionally, fruit and vegetables are about the same. And we really prioritize vegetables over fruit as adults. And we really don't need to. Try repeated exposure and having them making foods with you. So we talked about that. Oh, and then buying them in a fun color like purple carrots or purple cauliflower. Those are super fun too. With meats, we talked about that. So trying to change from breaded meat to grilled meat. And then you can also try protein alternatives like beans, nut butters, and dairy if they're not big on meat. So at the end of the day, what your child ate or did not eat is not a reflection of your parenting. That's a really important statement. Trust that your child knows what their body needs. It's okay if they didn't eat enough. Tomorrow is another day. Keep having fun at meal times, no matter the outcome of the meal. And if you really feel like you're struggling, and if everything I said to you today is like, yeah, not my kid is not going to do that. You might benefit from some support from us, not from us, but from any feeding therapist that you could seek. And then these are just some resources. So the EllenSatterInstitute.org is where you could find those food rules. Cheryl Fraker wrote a book on the food chaining, which is available on Amazon. The Get Permission approach has Marsha Dunn Klein. She wrote a book called Anxious Eaters, Anxious Mealtimes, which is also available on Amazon. And it's really, really good, really good. So that one I would highly recommend. OrganicCookeryschool.org just has really fun blog ideas for ways to cook with food, and it also has portion sizes, which is nice. Feedingmatters.org is a really great organization that focuses on children with feeding disorders. So if you're worried, they have a questionnaire it's like a 5-question questionnaire that can help you figure out if they think that your child might have a feeding disorder and you might need some more support. These are just some people that I like to follow on Instagram. If you're into Instagram, they have a lot of really great posts. And if you feel like you need some feeding therapy in your life, that's our website to find us. So I've got also another list of resources that I can go through, but I wanted to see if anybody had any questions or comments before I do that.
If you guys have questions, you can feel free to unmute yourself and ask your questions. If it's a more private question, you can certainly email me and I can follow up with Sarah on a more personal level and hopefully get some questions answered. But does anybody have any questions based off of the content or topic for this evening?
Yeah, I just had a quick question. It's Nancy Davis.
Hi, Nancy.
Thank you, Sarah, for all of the great information you provided me. I had no idea that some of the things I did when he was growing up, because we are a little bit OCD about cleanliness. So when he was a baby, he really, like, we kept him pretty darn clean. So
Yeah.
I'm sure it probably played a role. Currently, my biggest problem is my son is so set in his ways about lunchtime is peanut butter jelly. And he'll let me sort of change what I provide with him. He'll eat carrots willingly, but I can't seem to get him to, eat something as simple as like spaghetti or, to change it up. He doesn't like anything. And so it can be really taxing. I worry so much that I'm not providing him enough nutrition. And he also doesn't tolerate things like gummies or those chalky chewable like vitamins and stuff. So I'm just worried that I'm not providing enough for him nutritionally. So what kind of advice could you give me on that?
So can you tell me how old he is?
He's 6.
6. Okay. And is his weight on his curve? Is he doing pretty well with his growth?
Yeah, he's doing all right. I mean, we're a short family. And so he's a little bit pudgy. And so I try and talk to him about, hey, some foods are tasty, but not so good for our body. And some foods are really good for our body and maybe not quite as tasty. Let's change it up and see if we can make it more tasty. And I've tried just everything under the sun. I don't know what to do next.
Yeah, well, and it sounds like maybe you might just need a little more support. So like you're on the right track, but feeding can be very anxiety producing for parents as well. And so one thing that Marsha Dunn Klein, that woman I referenced with her book, Anxious Eaters, Anxious Mealtimes, one thing that she really stresses is having mealtime peace. So what does it take to get to mealtime peace, right? So if he is very insistent on this sameness, like it has to be peanut butter and jelly, and it has to be whatever it is at this mealtime, it sounds like he's got some anxiety surrounding mealtimes. And so I think that probably you guys would benefit from some more support, maybe in some feeding therapy where the therapist could kind of work through some of that with you guys. And sometimes it's a matter of like, maybe today we don't change the peanut butter and jelly because that feels good to him. But maybe today we eat the peanut butter and jelly in a different way. So maybe we eat it on a different plate or at a different location, or we eat it upside down, or we eat it on the trampoline in the backyard. And so we're changing something else that's maybe not going to cause stress for him. But he can see that the final point of it is change is going to happen and it's going to be okay. And whatever that change is. And maybe you need to say like, oh, look, I am eating, or what I'm eating my peanut butter and jelly on a blue plate today. And maybe that's all the change he can have in his life right now.
Yeah, well, he'll let me I'll put it on different plates. I've gotten him to let me cut it in different shapes.
Oh,
So
good.
like, do you
Okay.
want squares today or do you want triangles today?
Oh, perfect.
And it
Good.
took like a whole year of asking him, how would you like me to cut your sandwich? Do you want triangles? Do you want a star? It took like a whole year for him to let me cut it in triangles and then he would eat it. Because before, if I cut it in a triangle, he would throw a
would
fit
eat
and
it.
go, I don't want it now.
Right. Yes.
So it's not so much like the color of the plate. He's starting to let me do some changes. But if I say, hey, I could make you Kraft macaroni and cheese, or how about leftover tacos, or, you know, things, trying to get him to change something else. But it's like, I had to narrow it down to one peanut butter jelly day because he wanted it for every meal, breakfast, lunch, and dinner.
Yeah.
So
now you're stuck on, we only eat it at lunch.
yeah. So
Yeah.
now it's like lunchtime. What do you want for lunch, William? And he goes, I want a peanut butter jelly, of course. And it's like,
Yeah.
do you want grape jelly? He goes, no, I want the same jelly. So I can't even change the
Change
jelly.
the jelly. So maybe what you do is you start with the jelly, right? So also, I think this would be really great for him to get involved in making the peanut butter and jelly with you if he's not doing that.
Okay.
And suspending your stress about the mess for just a little bit. Yeah. And letting him kind of and get involved. And so maybe one day what you do is you have his peanut butter and jelly. And then you have a new peanut butter and jelly with a little bit of with his jelly, but you have a little bit of the grape jelly on it. And you say, I wonder what this grape jelly tastes like. I wonder what this grape jelly smells like. I wonder if it's different.
Okay.
And you just kind of like pose these things, and he still has his safe food, but he also has this new opportunity to smell grape jelly or to touch grape jelly or to taste it with his finger. And there's just so many options, you know, on doing those things. But it sounds like if you really are if you're stressed, and it sounds like he might be stressed and you're worried about his nutrition, that would be just kind of like a red flag for maybe just some extra support for you guys. So somebody could walk you through these examples specific to what William needs.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you for the question, Nancy. Anybody else have any specific questions regarding this topic that they'd like to ask Sarah? No? All right. Well, thank you guys. We are going to do a follow-up email tomorrow with some of these great resources that Sarah sent us. So we will email you guys all of the links and different, again, recommendations on books and things like that, that hopefully will be valuable tools for you guys when you navigate this topic with your young athletes. So we'll be sending that out tomorrow. And then for next month, our topic is going to be oral health. And that's going to be on June 30th. So Ashton will also be sending out a registration link. I believe it's available already, but you guys, we will send a reminder about that one as well. So does anybody have any last questions, comments they'd like to share?
And I included in that the handouts that Mandy's going to send for Nancy also, and for everybody. There's one handout that says picky eater versus problem feeder. And it kind of delineates, you know, maybe do you have a picky eater or do you maybe have a problem? And so that kind of maybe helps you kind of figure out if you do need some more support as well.
Hi, Mandy. Hi, everyone. Hi, Sarah, for presenting. I'm sorry, I had to answer an urgent call, and so I got cut off and cut away from the presentation a little bit. So I hope you don't mind me asking, and I hope it's not a repetitive question for the others. But with my kiddos, it's you know, and I kind of take responsibility for that from an early age. With the younger one, we did do a feeding therapy program to kind of get them used to different textures. One is on the autism spectrum. But how can you get the kids or my kids to kind of, or our kids in general, to eat more of the vegetables and the fruits? Like, it's such a battle, and I don't know, you know, like, I don't know if you ever grew up with that caramel dip that you eat with apples, or so it's like a, do you give them that? You making the situation worse because you're still giving them something sweet. So how do you balance that? I'm really, really struggling with it.
Oh, totally. Yeah, well, you know what also I think would be beneficial is for Mandy, if you want to, I can send you the presentation.
Yes,
And
absolutely.
we can send you the slides as well, Linda, because I think that a lot of the slides might help with that. Absolutely try the caramel dip, right? Because at the end of the day, they're still eating the strawberry. And then you can try and work away from the caramel dip, because the more times that they have exposure to the food. So even if it's just, let's say you put a bunch of raspberries on your fingertips and you're just playing around with raspberries, you know, that's a closer step to eating raspberries than it is with them just in your fridge going bad. So any kind of exposure, even if they're just passing you raspberries, or making a fruit salad with you, or you're blending vegetables and putting them into a spaghetti sauce, that you're not hiding from them. They're seeing that, they're watching, and they're helping. All those things can be really helpful. So the key to that component really is just the more exposure, even if they aren't eating it, is going to get them closer to eating. So I have also in the handouts that we're going to send this scale called the Journey to Eating. And basically what it outlines is that it's a ladder. And so at the top of the ladder is actually eating a food. And at the bottom of the ladder is being able to tolerate being in the same room with that food. So there are a lot of steps in between being in the same room with a food and eating a food. And most kids, especially kids on the autism spectrum, have a really hard time transitioning between those steps on the ladder. And so even if they just tolerate a food on their plate today that they didn't eat, that is a success, and we can look at that as a win. If they touched it today, if they smelled it today, if they interacted with it in any kind of sensory way, that is closer to them eating it, instead of bribing them or coaxing them, or doing all these other things that are really stressful, making it more fun in other ways.
What if the food that and I'm also finding this issue, what if they're regressing in the foods that they once ate? Like just even something as simple as cheese. Suddenly they're not wanting it.
Yeah. And we do deal with that a lot in feeding therapy as well. So like kids that drop foods, right? So they used to have 30 foods and now they only have 25 because they ate so much cheese that they got sick of it, and now they don't want to eat cheese anymore. And so it's definitely something that we work on in feeding therapy. I think the other thing, cheese is really great because cheese is really versatile, right? So it doesn't have to be the same kind of cheese that they used to eat. It could be any kind of cheese, right? So you could bring out any kind of cheese and have it on the plate, or have it, it doesn't even have to be like traditional dinner food, right? You could have like a cheese platter with a bunch of different types of cheese. Oh, I wonder if this cheese smells the same as this cheese. Probably not, right? Because cheese is very diverse. Oh, look at this cheese. It has holes in it. Oh, can you stick your finger through the holes? I mean, so there's tons of things that you can do to just kind of re-expose. I think it's important to make sure that our kids have foods that feel safe to them on their plate, alongside foods that they're, we like to say, learning about. So foods that, we want them to eat that they're not really ready to eat. And then I had mentioned earlier too, that it's a really great practice too, for you to sit down and talk to your kids. Like, are there any foods that you're interested in learning more about? Like, is there any kind of food that you think that you might want to see more of? Like maybe your kid is interested in something that you wouldn't have thought of. When we do this in therapy, sometimes kids come up with crazy stuff. Like they say, like, I would really like to learn more about sushi. Okay, let's get some sushi. Sushi is great. It's got protein. It's got, it's got a mix of all sorts of things. So I think if you sit down and if you can have that conversation with them, they become more involved and they have more skin in the game, so to say.
Thank you so much. And lastly, I don't know if any links or anything were put into the chat while I was out. Not sure if that happened, but I don't know if that can be shared. Thanks again for your wisdom.
Sure. Yes. And don't hesitate to reach out for feeding therapy. We tend to do, we do 12 sessions. So we do 12, like it's 12 weeks. So it's just 3 months. And then we send you home and have you do everything that we talked about and worked on in therapy so that you guys can work on that at home. And it's really hard for me to like explain. I feel like I'm talking so fast because it's really hard for me to like explain all of what we do in feeding therapy in this short time frame that will be relevant to each and every one of you. So if you do feel like you need more support, we're here for that.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Sarah. So as she mentioned, I will follow up with an email to everyone tomorrow with all the links, all the recommended books. We will also send the recording of the presentation so you can rewatch it if you missed any of it during this last hour. You guys can check that out. It will be on our Young Athletes YouTube playlist as well, so you can access it there, but we will send out a follow-up email tomorrow with all of this valuable information for you guys to access at any time that you need. And then if you have specific questions that you want to ask, you can also email me and I can try to forward them on to Sarah if they're more personal or anything that you'd rather share one-on-one. We can certainly do our best to make some connections and possibly if you're interested in the feeding therapy portion of it, we can reach out and help you make those connections too. So thank you so much, Sarah, for your time. We really appreciate it. And hopefully we can have you again on soon.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Sarah.
I'm just putting my my email in the chat, and Linda, to answer your question, I work for Children's Hospital. My email's there.
Is there a specific branch, sorry, that you're with? Or are you out of the main campus?
The main campus. Oh, I guess let me put it to everyone. I didn't put that. Hold on. Yes, I work out of the main campus and through telehealth as well. But we also have lots of feeding therapists at all of our sites, so it could be anywhere. And it's just the feeding and swallowing team.
Awesome.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Sarah.
For sure.
Thank you, everybody, for your time. We appreciate you committing to logging on and joining us. Again, feel free to register for next month's event on oral health, help spread the word. We'd love more families to be able to access all of these resources. So thank you guys so much for your time, and we look forward to chatting with you next month. Thanks again, Sarah.
Thank you. I'm going to send you the PowerPoint right now.
Perfect. Thanks, everybody. We'll send it out tomorrow with all the follow-up resources.